Welcome back to the scorching heat of the desert, builders. We are taking a look at Ubar, Kingdom of the Unseen. This is a nation that was added relatively late into Dom 5's lifetime, and so is one of the newer nations. It has a reputation in multiplayer of being completely and utterly oppressive. Conversely, when countered, it is not very good, but you have to set yourself up to counter them. So that combination really makes them a relatively hated nation by the multiplayer community. But we don't have that problem because we are going to play them in a single player game to show them off. Let's check them out and see what they're all about. Ubar is the kingdom of the unseen, the Janoon of the desert. Its heart is a paradise hidden beyond 3 deserts of scorching heat, one red, one white, and one as black as the night. Beyond the 3 deserts lies a plateau hidden with the mirages of the Janoon. There is but one entrance in the cliff side of the plateau, and it is always guarded by invisible sentinels. Once you have passed the entrance, you enter a city covered in sand. This is the Aram of 1,000 pillars, home of the Janoon. Once this was a paradise with date palms, fountains, palaces in abundance. Towers of brass and marble rose towards the heavens. Fist-sized rubies and diamonds lit the streets and the palaces, and the air was filled with music and pleasant fragrances. This was the city of brass. But the lords of Ubar rebelled against the powers that were, and the city was sealed by a divine decree. The Afarit, the mightiest of the Janoon, were imprisoned in their palaces with their rebel god. Now the Aram is a desert city inhabited by a few jinn and their human slaves, waiting for the gates of brass to open and the return of the Afrit Sultan. Ilwinter, you forgot a period there. Awesome nation. Very cool. Middle Eastern genies, or jinn. Great concept, pretty unique, pretty powerful. Let's take a look at their national features here. Our race is jinn, and the jinn have human slaves. In addition, we also have some desert folk who are not slaves. We have our heat scales at preference 3, so pretty dang high. Do note that you can start having pretty heavy pop kill effects if you get your heat scales too high or too cold, so just be aware of that. For our military, we have human infantry and camel riders. We have ghouls, jinn warriors, and sacred Ifrit warriors. Very powerful military. For magic, we have a very strong fire and air, and we have a smidgen of glamour. We have very, very little blood, a tiny bit of earth, and a very little amount of astral. So fire and air are definitely our strongest two. Our priests are weak, and we have guardian spirits. We'll take a look at that. Our dominion hides province ownership. That means when our dominion is over an area, the enemy can't see that we own it. In single player, it is actually kind of bad because that means the AI can attack you without necessarily declaring war. And in multiplayer, maybe it sees a little more use, but I mean, you kind of know where people are after a time. So I'm not sold on that necessarily being a great thing or a bad thing. It just is a thing. For our scales and blessings, we get a heat limit +1, hence our preference of 3, and a magic limit of +1, which is kind of rare, kind of nice to have. We get standard forts, and our forts reduce the scale's deaths by 1 step. Heat scale death, specifically. So if our heat gets up to 4 or 5, then that will lower the heat by 1 for purposes of killing off population. As for sites, we are a strange nation. I don't know of any other nation who has a similar mechanic to this. We start with 2 sites. We have the 3 deserts, which provide us with a fire, air, and death gem, and increase the heat there by 1. It also is a scorching desert, which will do 2 armor negating fire damage. So that can be really, really nasty. Units with wasteland survival are immune. Obviously, units that have fire resistance are immune. And only units that are ending or starting their move are affected. So if you walk past it without stopping there, you do not have that problem. So that can be pretty nasty. Like if you have units that are weak to fire and you're trying to siege this place down, that could be pretty nasty. Next, we have the Iram of 1,000 Pillars. This is our place that gives us our starting cap only recruits. Gives us a glamour gem and a fire gem, and allows us to recruit 4 of our cap only units. Next, we have the weird mechanic. So this is a nation, as mentioned in the lore, that their god was sealed away. You have to start at least dormant with your god. And when your god wakes up, you also get 3 more sites in your capital. First up, we have Jinnah. This is another site that gives us more recruitables and gives us a nature gem income and increases the growth here. Very nice to have something like that. The growth, if nothing else, can help counter maybe some of the heat deaths that may take place here. Next, we have the actual City of Brass. Again, it brings in more cap-only units, noticing a pattern here, and another fire gem. And finally, we have the Vault of Incense and Marvels, which gives us an additional 150 income and an additional glamour gem. So that is 1 gem, 2 gems, 3 gems, 5, 8. 8 gems. Very high income for a nation. And all things that are relatively usable, although we struggle to use the death gem, perhaps. Next up, let us take a look at their units, and this is going to be a little bit of a weird one because this is not everything that they can recruit shown up here because of those sites. First up, we have the Ubaran Desert Warrior, and this is a recruit anywhere troop. Surprisingly okay, I'll say that about him. For 7 gold, 7 resources, 5 recruitment points, you get a Stealthy, Wasteland Survival, Pillager, we'll come back, Skirmisher, Undisciplined. So that's a lot of relatively unique things here. So, Pillager. Pillager is a special ability that allows you to move and pillage provinces. Pillaging raises unrest. I think it directly kills some pop, and you just directly extract some money there. So it's not something you would want to do to your own lands, but if you're raiding an enemy, pillaging them is kind of a double whammy. It's increasing your income and leaving them problems behind. So very useful in territory that you're taking but not expecting to be able to hold. Next up, we have Skirmisher. Skirmisher allows you to be put into skirmish formation, aka skirmish or sparse line, without taking the -1 morale ability, which is pretty nice for these guys because they're also undisciplined, so we can't give them any special orders. They're just going to kind of be in skirmish. And surprisingly, they're all right. These are archers. They have a short bow, standard human, but instead of a dagger, they actually have a scimitar. Scimitars are pretty nice weapons. They have an additional +1 attack to them. And yeah, 11 attack, 17 damage on that, on an archer. It's all right. It's all right. It's no spear archers, which I absolutely have fallen in love with, but I will take this over a standard archer. In addition, we do pay for that scimitar, though. That is why our resources, I think, are so darn high, because otherwise we're just wearing robes and a cloth headpiece. So 3 protection is nothing. I mean, you're essentially naked. But between being spread out, having a decent melee weapon, being stealthy, I think these guys are all right. I generally wouldn't get these for my main army. I would pick something different. But as a stealthy raid force, or just to try to like reclaim territory that somebody else has maybe taken off you and they're not like PD trapping you or something, I think these guys are perfectly fine. If I had to get them out of forts, I would like them a lot less. But the fact that they're recruit anywhere and so cheap, even the worst provinces, you can get 3 or 4 of these guys. Do that in a couple areas and then just pick them up. Usable troops. Next up, let's look another recruit anywhere with our Ubaran Camel Rider. I really like these guys. Very similar to the guy we just looked at, but now he rides a camel. The camel himself has all the problems that the cavalry have inherited in 6 with the new mechanics, aka he's not wearing armor. He's only got 4 protection. He is 20 HP, so pretty darn vulnerable. The cavalry chassis himself, nothing to write home about, although he is stealthy for some reason. He's a sneaky boy camel. Animal, wasteland survival, it's all fine. What makes him nice is actually the rider, and specifically the fact that he comes in with falcons. The falcons are unscriptable. At the first round of combat, they will just go fly onto the enemy. But that is amazing. It is so good to get those, just pepper the enemy archers. So now the archers aren't shooting at you and you're shooting at them. To get in the front of the melee lines, to soak javelin fire for you. If you're lucky, they get on a mage, and the likelihood of them killing a mage, not much, but you break their script. You keep them busy. They're not buffing. They're not throwing spells at you. And if the birds die, and they will die, it doesn't matter. You just get a new one next combat. Also, these guys are stealthy, wasteland survivor, pillager, skirmisher, so same as we saw before. In addition, they're skilled riders. So the skilled rider will increase the morale and defense of his mount. So if we look at the camel, they've actually got 12 morale, which is pretty good for an animal. And the extra defense takes our camel up to 11. It's okay. The rider's at 14. He is wearing that really light armor, so essentially unarmored. But we are a mobile archer. So these guys are really nice. Put them towards the front. Tell them to fire and keep distance closest. They'll get some decent shots in while the birds are keeping things busy. Enemy approaches and they will just back up. They are 26 speed, so far faster than most troops will be able to do, so they'll never be caught until they're cornered at the back of the map. And the whole time they can keep firing while they are moving, so they don't have the problem of they shot and then because of that they can't move, so other people catch up to them. He is equipped also with a composite bow. The footmen only have a short bow. So between the short bow and the composite bow is much better. Yes, we only have precision 8 because we are firing well mounted. However, the extra range, 13 damage versus 11, I think I would always take this. I would always take this one. It's just a better bow, frankly, even with the slightly lowered accuracy. We have access to air magic. If for some reason you're just dead set on buffing that, you could raise this to 11 pretty easily. So, a very nice troop, and the fact that these are non-fort recruitables really helps them out. Again, these are getting a little more pricey, 25 gold, 9 resources, but you can usually get 2, 3, 4, 5, out of a decent province, and then again, just move around and collect them. And we have a camel rider leader who's quite good at that. These would make an excellent stealthy, mobile raid force. Very powerful there. Most PD is not going to be able to handle, let's say like 20 of these maybe, with those birds hopping on them, keeping them distracted. These guys are going to be shooting. Yeah, these can be pretty dang powerful. And we have some very mobile thugs that we could use to back these up. So a squad of these and a thug coming in to help them during hard parts definitely could do some major damage to the enemy during raid attacks. And even for your main army, just the simple fact that you get that many disposable birds to distract people on turn 1, that's the important part, is very powerful, not to be underestimated there. Okay, moving into the rest of our human troops. These are our slave troops. We have 3 varieties. Our Ubaran soldier. Bronze gear. We do not really like iron, particularly around these parts. They have wasteland survival, and they are a slave. Is this guy somebody to write home about being absolutely amazing? No, not really. He's a standard human, basically 10s across the board. He is decently equipped. He has a bronze scale cuirass, a bronze cap, and a shield. Run around with a bronze spear and javelins. Of note, because he's a slave, very bad morale. He's only got 8 morale, which is pretty devastating. I mean, even with decent leadership, you're probably looking at a 10. Again, pretty bad. But you're 4 gold a year. Recently, we looked at Hinnom, and in Hinnom, we had some Enkidu slaves that we were using for siege chaff. They were also 4 gold a year, and they didn't have any way to fight. These guys at least can fight and have armor, etc. They are a little pricey on resources, so 10 gold, 12 resources, 7 recruitment, but that's not going to break the bank or anything. And they have very, very little upkeep. These guys are totally usable, okay at being line troops because they have spears, although they do not like long, grindy combat because of that low morale. I would say decent. They get a thumbs up. Next up, we have the Ubaran Archer. I don't like these guys particularly. 7 morale, so we're even lower. We have Wasteland Survival. We are a slave. We have the short bow of our foot desert warriors. I think I would rather have the other guys. They're cheaper. Yes, these are armored, but they're not. You're probably not going to spread them out, so you're more vulnerable to counter archer fire, I think, than the other ones. These have to be recruited from a fort. I'm just not sold on these ones. 10-10-7 is not cheap, and with that really bad morale, they're likely to end up just running off the field. So I'm not entranced with these ones. Maybe a squad of them. What they would be useful for is they're easier to put fire arrows on and to buff their precision because they're not going to be in skirmish formation. So maybe once you're actually rocking buffing magic, maybe these would make more sense than your skirmishable, undisciplined troops. Finally, we have the Brazen Guard. These ones are much better. We're still a slave troop, but now we're up to 11 morale, so we're actually going to be able to hold a little bit. And you'll have Taskmasters, I believe, giving you +2, so this will be at 13, acceptable morale. They are bodyguards, and they're pretty good bodyguards. Bodyguard 3 is pretty dang high. And yeah, that's a usable trait to have. We have a Bronze Scimitar. Generally for line infantry, I prefer spears, especially on humans, but I think going up to the extra morale, we have the same gear as the other troops. We have gone up to 18 resources, so a little on the pricey side, but I feel like these guys are all right. They're okay. Next up, we have an interesting troop. This is the Ghoul, and these are recruited from our capital, which I believe always comes in as a wasteland, as well as other wastelands. 20 gold, 1 resource, 20 recruitment points, and you get a dang strong demon. We can just recruit demons. Attack-wise, they have a length 0 claw, which is 13 attack and 11 damage. So length 0 is a little bit unfortunate, but they have good morale, so they can kind of sort of ignore getting poked by repels. They have an incredibly strong 50% regen with 12 HP. That is amazing. They're fire resistant, they are poison resistant, they're magic beings, so you have to lead them with mages. They don't eat, they're stealthy. They have iron vulnerability, so if they get hit with an iron weapon, you take extra damage. I believe it's just +3 is the way that math works. They're vulnerable to salt. Salt is a specifically craftable item. It's an Earth 1. I believe it's made at Construction 3. We'll take a look when we get to items. Salt is a hard counter to these units that are vulnerable to it. We're a demon with all that entails. We have Wasteland Survival, and we have Spirit Sight, so we have perfect vision, essentially. Dark vision and seeing invisible things. These are quite good. Higher morale than our slave troops. They have the regen, which is relatively powerful. I like these troops quite a lot. Also, they have a wounded shape. The wounded shape is kind of like a were hyena looking thing, something like that. And they are very powerful. They are ethereal. They gain a bite attack at 13 attack, and their strength goes up, so both their claw attack and their bite attack are going to deal more damage. So the fact they have a second form that's ethereal is very powerful. Dealing with ethereal troops, if you're not set up to do that, is just crippling. It's so painful. Finally, for our beginning, we have the Jinn Warriors. These are our cap-only troops, not sacreds. And they have the basic troops of all Jinns. Shock resist 5, fire resist 25, susceptible to cold 5, magic being, ethereal, flying, stealthy. We have glamour, which gives you mirror images in combat. We are unseen. An unseen troop gives melee attackers a -9 to hit until you are hit. When you're hit, you lose unseen. It also can be countered by being blind. So if you have blind fighters or something like that, or by having spirit sight, then you can ignore that. So their 12 defense is kind of sort of more like having, what would that be, 21 defense until they are hit. So pretty powerful there. They have the iron vulnerability, the salt vulnerability, wasteland survival, spirit sight. They have magic power 1. When you have magic scales in the province, this will buff you. I believe it is strength, attack, and defense. as the buffables. Maybe protects you. I always mix these ones up, but a good stat bonus all around. They also have storm immunity, so you can fly or do whatever else during storms. Equipment wise, because we don't like iron, we tend to stick towards bronze. We use the bronze scimitar at 13 attack, and we have halberd and cap. Good troops, very good troops here. Hold and attack rear should be your first thought with these guys. So you have something to stand in front of your leadership, and then these guys hop in the back and ideally assassinate the enemy leadership. They do come in at a premium, though. 50 gold, 21 resources, 27 recruitment points is not cheap, and they're not sacred, so are 40 gold upkeep per year per unit. So these guys can be pretty expensive, but you get what you pay for, especially if the enemy is not countering you particularly well. Next, let's look at our troops that come in from our sites. So from the Janah, we get Guardians of the Forbidden Chambers. These are basically like the harem guards. They have the basic stats of the genies we looked at. These ones, in addition, have Bodyguard 2. Pretty good. They are using an enchanted scimitar. So now we have a 16 attack, magic, 20 damage weapon. And they have put on good armor. So they're not wearing a helmet, unfortunately, but their body armor is at 12. So hard to hit with decent armor. They are size 4, protecting their head maybe a little bit from human-sized troops, depending on the weapon they're using. Overall, a very good unit, although, again, 75 gold, 27 resources, 37 recruitment points. Very pricey gentleman here. Next up, we have our Ifrit Warrior. This is our cap-only sacred, and man, they are powerful. Held back by one of the changes of Dominion 6, we cost 3 sacred points per unit. 3 sacred points per unit. So that's going to kind of tell you how powerful these guys are. We have the standard suite of gen abilities. In addition, we have a fire shield that does 10 armor piercing damage. Remember that fire shields were changed so that you don't have to hit the enemy to take the fire damage, you just have to attack the enemy. That is a huge buff here, because not only are we ethereal with 11 defense, we are also unseen. So they have that -9 to attack you. So as they're missing you, they're getting hit with 9 armor-piercing fire damage. Humans have 10 HP, generally speaking. They may literally just kill themselves for attacking you. Very powerful there. We have firepower, which means the hotter the province is, we get that bonus to our stats, in addition to magic power. So let's say you were running 2 and 2. Plus 4 attack would take us up to 21 attack, 15 defense, 23 strength. Like, that is ridiculous amounts of essentially free stats. Very, very powerful. We are using Golden Scale Mail, which is magic. Magic armor is harder to destroy via spells, and I think it's harder to break with just mundane means too. Very, very powerful unit. Protection 14, and really it's 17 on the body. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. It should be noted that they do have minimum leader size 6. So most of our leaders are not size 6, so they refuse to be led by them. This is an instance where if you are able to craft something that gives your unit enlarge, that would be pretty helpful. You can't be sneaky about it by just taking the bless, because that would also increase these guys, and I think this increases with that. I did not test that. If somebody wants to test that and leave a comment about it, but I don't think a enlarged bless will do it, because I think your leader has to be the same size or bigger than you. Overall, a very strong sacred, but you're not going to have very many. I mean, let's say you started with 6 or 7 or 8, that's still only 2 per turn. So these guys are going to be pretty precious, but also pretty powerful. Next up, let us take a look at heroes, commanders, and prophet. Starting with heroes, we get 3. We have Banu Silat. This is kind of a middle-aged Nabah type person. We'll look at them when we get to middle age, but running around with our bronze gear, he has 1 fire, 1 air, 1 glamour, random of the same plus earth. He's alright. He's kind of sort of like a Jinn in that he's flying, he has the fire resist, he has the glamour, he does have the iron vulnerability. He's alright, has good leadership. I don't believe. I take that back. These might be a multi-recruit. I'm not 100% certain on that. I didn't get any in my test games, but if it's a multi-recruit, I mean, they're usable leaders, but they don't really excel at anything else. So, not really super duper exciting, other than just being usable. Next up, we have the Black King, big old Jin here. He's pretty dang strong. He comes in with 4 fire, 4 air, a water, 2 earth, 2 glamour, 2 blood. We do not have great blood access by our regular troops, so he's amphibious. Very good because we do a lot of fire stuff and we don't have native water, so it's hard to get underwater. If you got this guy, that's an in that you could use. He has fear, shock resist, fire resist, cold penalty. He is a magic being himself. He has heat 9, so really powerful heat aura. Flying unseen, 16 fire shield, which is just absolutely ridiculous. I would love to make this guy into a very heavy thug slash super combatant. He has firepower, he causes a lot of unrest, he has magic power. Very cool if you get him, very usable. I think my number one priority if I got him would be looking for getting underwater, since he is a guy that kind of lets us do that. Next up, we have Mother Ghoul. 2 death, 3 blood. Highest of both of those that our nation gets. She has the same 50% regeneration. She is an assassin. She's an actual demon. She has an extra blood searcher. She's going to greatly break you into blood if you can get there. I would consider maybe even empowering her a little bit. Maybe you could summon in vampire lords, help you out. We have some national blood summons that she would be great for doing, although our random bloods can also do it. All around, I would say this is probably, I don't know, her and the Black King are both incredibly good. So if you got either one of these, you would be quite excited for that. Starting in our regular commanders, we have the Ubaran Scout. He is very similar to the other Desert Warriors. I will note, he only is 30 gold. So for Scouts, he is on the cheaper side of that. And otherwise, I wouldn't say too much here. I guess he also has Mountain Survival in addition to Wasteland Survival. They are fort recruits. They're not recruit anywheres, unfortunately. That would be really powerful if they were. We have an Ubaran commander. This is our Taskmaster. He's got Taskmaster +2. Unfortunately, he's only a 75 leadership, so no formations. And for our really cheap slave troops, he only takes them to 10 morale. So not particularly great there. I don't love this guy. Next up, we have the Ubaran Sheik, or Sheik. This guy is recruit anywhere. This is a nice unit. 75 gold, 9 resources, 1 recruitment point. He is the same as our Camel Cavalry. He summons in 1d3 Falcons at the beginning of combat. He's stealthy, he has Wasteland Survival, he's a Pillager, he's a Tax Collector. Tax Collector allows you to get income from the province you're in, even if it is not connected to a fort. What does that mean? It means if you're deep raiding somebody and they're following behind you, retaking their land, you still get the money out that otherwise you wouldn't be getting. So quite powerful there. Otherwise, he has the same exact abilities. I like these guys quite a decent amount. Because they're recruit anywhere stealthy, your camels are also recruit anywhere stealthy. You can build up forces of these guys to sneak over and either do the pillaging / raiding thing, or just take their land directly. So very, very nice unit. I like these guys quite a bit. Next up, we have our 3 humans mages. We have the Kohen. The Kohen is a priest 1 with a random of fire, air, and earth. That's not particularly exciting. They have 10 leadership, but they are taskmasters. Again, not particularly exciting. They are sacred, so only 40 gold per year. 40 gold for 7 research is very efficient. You know, I usually say I want 10 upkeep for at least 1 research at minimum. And you're probably going to have magic scales of 2 or 3, so they're really going to be a 9 or even a 10 for 40 gold. That being said, there's not a ton to do with these type of pathings. You'd be having to look at building boosters or like storm power, phoenix power to get much use out of them. So I get a few of these guys. I use them to help build the infrastructure. Since they are priests and mages, that's nice just to have one guy, and a cheap one at that, to run around and do that. Otherwise, not too much to say about them. Next up, we have the Human Sahir. This is Fire 1, Air 1. and you get a random of fire or air or earth. I would say the earth one is the least useful. Having one in each of those paths doesn't really give you much to do. Maybe those are guys that just research or site search for you, maybe. Uh, Fire 2 obviously gives you Phoenix power. Air 2 gives you direct access to lightning bolts. So those two are pretty useful. For upkeep, they're 128 gold for 11 research. I would much rather have 3 of the other guys than one of these. I'm not a huge fan of this one. They do have some magical leadership, so they can lead around some magic troops if you have to. Yeah, not a huge fan of these guys. I am a fan of the Tuba. This is a pretty good guy. He's Fire 1 and Priest level 1. In addition, he gets a Fire or an Air or an Earth. So you can get up to 2 Fire just right off the bat, or you could get a combo of them. Why do I like them? Well, even if you get something unuseful, they're adept researchers. So for 108 gold, you get 13. And again, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 magic scales. So it's really 15 or maybe even 16 for 100 gold. I don't think that's quite as efficient, but they're faster to recruit for more research. In addition, these guys are super useful as leaders. So maybe even your junkie guys with the Earth. Earth is pretty good for a leader. They can give themselves personal iron skin and then at least be relatively safe. 110 leadership is really good. That allows you to have formations and a +1 morale. In addition, they have Taskmaster 2, so even your slave units are going to come in with 3 extra morale. These guys are a little more pricey up front, but I feel like it is justified. I tend to lead troops around mostly with these guys if I'm using slave troops. Having that adept researcher really helps them stay efficient. Next up, we have the Jin Emir. This is like our Jin leader. He's got 110 leadership. He comes in with an enchanted scimitar and the lightweight scale mail. 1 fire, 1 air. Gets a random of fire, air, earth, or glamour. All of which are kind of sort of useful. Glamour 1's nice. There's some spells you can do there. He's a priest 1. He is sacred. He has all the genie abilities. I would say generically, this is a good guy to lead around your genies. He has 30 magic leadership. And he is a genie himself, so they're all going to be able to fly and have the same map move. Pretty good. Very usable troop. I don't have overly much to say about them. They're not great as your combat mages. They're not quite strong enough to thug by themselves, but as leaders of genies, they're pretty good. Maybe a raiding leader. Next up, we have the Jin Sahir. This is a much better caster. 2 fire, 2 air, a glamour, the 100% chance of fire, air, earth, or glamour. Very good pathing. All of those are somewhat useful. We do have some cross pathing in there, so even the weird cross pathing can be useful. They have the standard genie abilities. In addition, they have Veil Army. They make your army look like it's 25 units smaller than it is. That actually is kind of useful. What you can do is use that on your armies, let the enemy figure out what's happening, and then put out decoy armies. So you have actually tiny armies that the enemy might think is actually a large army. If you have 3 armies and you only have 1 army to counter them, you have to guess which one is the real one. So you can play a little bit of a shell game with your armies and having those type of abilities. Pretty handy, actually. I don't think it really tricks the AI much, but in multiplayer that would be a very useful thing. They are also 60 magic leadership, which is a lot higher than most of our guys. It should be noted that our ghouls require magic leadership. So, yeah, if you don't have those guys, it's hard to lead these around. Looking at our other commanders that we get from our sites, we have the, I believe this is pronounced Ori. An interesting unit. It's a seducer that only costs 1 recruitment point. So in our capital, we have 3 recruitment points. So we actually could end up getting 3 of these per turn. Seduction's really hit or miss. You'd probably want to give her a seduction item and a protection item, aka like handful of acorns or a skeleton summoning item or an imp summoning item. Something, because she's not a very good fighter. 7 attack with her fist. If she gets caught, she's probably going to die. That is unfortunate for her. They are flying, which is nice on seducers, and size 4, so they can fly away with human-sized people. Human-sized men, because they are seducers. Um, I think they might be worthwhile because you can get 3 of them. 2 turns is 6 of them. If you throw 6 of these at somebody, you'll probably get something out of it. Otherwise, not particularly remarkable. They're not mages, so they don't make good assassins. Seducers generally turn into assassins, so they're okay. Whatever on that. Next up, we have a couple more here. Let's look at the Shaitan first. This guy's incredible. And man, do you pay for it. 500 gold. 2 recruitment points, and 1 resource. He comes in with 2 fire, 2 air, a glamour, 100% chance of fire, air, earth, and blood. So if you have no other way of getting blood, these guys break you in. Our national blood spells actually only require 1 blood, which is very much appreciated that you can actually do your national spells. So if nothing else, I would recruit until I got at least 1 of these guys, get my blood stuff rolling as soon as you can. Again, you have to wait for that sight to appear when your god awakes before these become available. Otherwise, they have the standard suite of Jinn abilities. However, they are also a spy. Spies allow you to go to the enemy capital and see the score graphs, even if they're not turned on in a game. In addition, they can instill uprisings, which kind of gives like a random event that there's like indie attack, and I believe it also raises unrest. I need to actually test that in 6. But that's not why these are amazing. These are amazing because they have Corruptor. Corruptor is similar to Seduction, but with no other restrictions. It makes the enemy make, I believe it's a morale check versus 13, which is the same as Seduction. However, Corruptor seems to actually work. In the test game, I'm going to show you a couple things from. I seduced an entire province's leadership away with one of these guys just slowly chipping away at it. And it's really, really nice. I also seduced a Nature 2 mage, which gave me a Nature 2 mage that I wouldn't have otherwise had access to. So incredibly powerful there. They're flying, they're glamour, they're stealthy, they're very hard to catch. If somebody does start trying to catch you, you just fly away. Go attack somewhere else. Very, very nice. They are decent combat mages in a pinch. Very, very good. Just note they're so expensive. So expensive. Finally, we have the Ifrit Sultan. 830 gold. This is up there with the Nipple Jarl Giant. He is expensive. What do you get for that? Well, 4 fire, 2 air, an earth, a glamour, and a random of air or earth or astral. That's our tiny bit of astral we have access to. Dang powerful. He is a priest level 1, so we don't have priest level 2, so it is kind of hard to bless our sacreds, but we're not going to have that many. He has 15 armor piercing fire shield. He has the firepower. He has the magic power. No armor on him and only 2 protection. So oftentimes I will use the earth to buff stone skin or iron skin on him. And yeah, that can be kind of important because these guys are so expensive and there's 6 recruitment points. So even in our improved capital, they still take 2 turns and they cost you 3 holy points. You do not want to lose these guys. You really, really, really don't want to lose these guys. Yeah, otherwise not much to say about them. They are very powerful mages. 4 fire is incredible. You could get, well, you're not going to probably get the random, but you could Phoenix power up to 5 just easily and cast some really big fire spells, like Firestorm. We have lots of troops who are basically immune to that, and we can cast it pretty dang easily. So, good there. I would classify this guy as maybe like a light super combatant if you can get him some gear. You would need to give him a piece of armor. You'd probably want to give him a shield, maybe a helmet. He would absolutely love a regen ring. That would make him much, much tougher. Do note that after he's been hit and loses his unseen, he only has 14 defense, but he's still ethereal and a flyer, so very powerful troop. Do note, all these genies are magical beings, and there are items and there are spells that specifically target that and are pretty darn devastating because they're designed specifically to counter you. And he still has that salt vulnerability, and he's very vulnerable to it. Who would I make my prophet? This is a weird one. I don't like any of the humans as your prophet because they are measly humans. 9 HP on this mage, 12 on this one. If I was gonna do a human, I would do it on a camel rider. At least he has 24 move and is stealthy. But I would probably wait, and I would put it on. If you have to do it before your god comes out, the Jin Emir would probably be a good choice. He's not a great caster. He can become your prophet. He can still like air shield himself and do profity things. Should be noted, he's only 148 gold. Maybe you decide, okay, well, I'm going to get a Jin Sahir and profit him because he costs 312. Um, the problem with that is if you're doing priest things, you're not doing mage things. So I don't know. I think of the two, I'd like this guy more. He does have armor also, make him a little tougher. If you can wait or you lose a profit, I do think a Nefrit Sultan is probably worth it. 332 gold a year is expensive, but I would probably put on him. He has fly, he has all the defensive things. Either way, I think you probably would like to do a genie as your prophet. National spells and items. We are a nation that actually does have some items. Let me transition into game. We have the Companion Bracelet. It is a construction 5, and it requires air 2 to be able to craft, so we can natively craft it. It gives you research +4. It gives you luck. You may not remove it. What's interesting here is the wearer of the silver bracelet has bonded a Kirin. So essentially, you have a bodyguard that is a genie. That's pretty darn good, actually. The Kirin is a Astral 1, Glamour 1. That's pretty good. Glamour 1 is a pretty darn good spell pathing. When they go off script, they tend to like to either buff or summon in little glamour troops, which is pretty handy. And the Astral 1, they might just give you body ethereal if you're not already a Jin. So that's a pretty darn nice item to have. The fact that you have extra research and it gives you luck, pretty decent, pretty decent. You're probably going to want to go up to 5 anyways for other boosters, other gear, maybe sanguine dowsing rods if you're really getting your blood economy rolling. Very usable item, I would say. While we are talking about items, let us also look at the salt. Yeah, it's a lesser magic item, so construction 3, and it requires Earth 1 with 5 Earth Gems. It does 1 magic damage and 1 salt damage. It's armor negating, air of effect 1. I don't know why it's length 3. I guess technically it's a melee item, but these absolutely destroy you. I believe when you get hit, not only do you take the damage, it stuns you. And I don't think you build up any resistance or anything. They just chain stun you once they get you in range with this. So if you're playing against humans, humans will definitely start doing this to you. So you have to be clever about not fighting armies that have that ready. So a very hard counter to your Jin. As for national spells, we have a lot of national spells. Let's go ahead and start in at Blood. From Blood at 4, we have Feast for Ghouls. Gives you 5+ ghoul summons for 16 blood slaves, and it must be cast in a wasteland. And at 5, we have Summon Gula. Note, both of those only require 1 blood, which we can random into on our Shaitans. So you're guaranteed to be able to do this if... And it doesn't feel too bad having to fish for that blood one, because the Shaitans are so powerful anyways, you're going to be recruiting them. A Gula is also a really nice commander unit. Let's take a peek at those. We have the Ghoul here, same as the one we can recruit, so we're basically just trading blood slaves for extra recruits of that. This is the secondary form of the Ghoul I was mentioning, that it has ethereal. So those are pretty efficient. You might be like, well, I can recruit them already. Yeah, they're hard to recruit. In your capital, you can do it, but your capital is going to be busy getting cap-only genies. So the summon is worthwhile. I do think it is worthwhile. These are just so hard to get rid of for some people if they're not equipped for it. And having these guys maybe run around with some mundane troops supporting them, or just upfront regening, they're tougher than they look. That regen is just ridiculous. They would absolutely love a little bit of buffing. Like, if you could give them bark skin, if you can break yourself into nature, or One of the Earth buffs, maybe, although we're not good at Earth either. So, Fog Warriors, maybe? Something. If you could give them some kind of defense, this region is ridiculous and just keeps them going. They go into second form that we're looking at, and then they're ethereal. So, they are quite good. They really, really do want that buff, though, somehow. If you could just get them a little bit of defense. The Gula is a commander, and it's a death 1, blood 1. Very similar to those guys. They have the 50% regen. They are assassins, and they are blood searchers. So, not blood 2s, which I believe are the most efficient blood searchers, but they come in with the blood search, so that puts them as a blood 2. So, get these guys, give them a sanguine dowsing rod, you're cooking. And they're not even that expensive to summon in. Like, that's an affordable spell. So I would start getting your blood economy built up probably after your god comes, because you're gonna have to, because you have to have the Shaitans to do it, and your god has to come in at dormant. But I do think it's worthwhile to do. It gives you other things that you can do. You don't have to just use the national blood summons here. Devils, just all the blood things that you can do are rather nice and give you some other options when the salt starts flowing and you're getting countered pretty heavily. Next up, from Evocation, we have 2 unique spells. At 4, we have Scorching Wind. Requires 2 air and a fire. That's very castable. We have plenty of different mages who can do that. Even some of our small guys can random into this. And this is a really strong spell. Range 40, air effect 6+, only 30 fatigue cost, so it's not terrible for little mages to do. It gives you Desiccation. Desiccation is fatigue damage. It's armor negating, magic resistance negates, doesn't affect undead, inanimate, and we can't do it underwater. So you get a 6+ area. The people who fail their magic save get 2d8 fatigue every turn, and they have to get a magic resist plus a DRN versus 22 to get out. A DRN is Dominion's random number, that's 2d6. So on a 2d6, if you have 10 magic resistance, you'd have to roll a 12 to get rid of it. So human troops are going to struggle with this. The average number of a DRN is 7, so yeah, that's going to really be hard to get rid of it. Even if you don't kill people via the fatigue, once you hit 20 fatigue, you start taking combat penalties, and they get worse the higher your fatigue goes. So this is really, really nice. It also should be noted, has no effect on living beings that are resistant to heat or have wasteland survival. That's everything we own. So there's no friendly fire with this spell. This would really help out like your slave troops or even your ghouls when they're in grind combat. Having this dropped on the enemy in front of them to just tire them out, give them penalties. Yeah, this is very helpful. And the fact that you don't have to worry about friendly fire is really nice. And that range is perfectly usable. Our second evocation national spell is Smokeless Flame. 3 fire and an air. So a little more exclusive to cast, but still not particularly hard. Very powerful. Range 35+, area of effect 1, gets an extra precision, only 30 fatigue, 45+ fire damage. Who cares about the plus when you're doing 45 armor-piercing damage? And it adds a lingering cloud, which is a combustion area of area 10. So combustion is your troops get lit on fire. Very powerful, especially against things that are weak to fire. Absolutely ridiculous. This is possibly even worth rushing because of how powerful it is. It should be noted, even those resistant to heat will suffer badly. That's because of how much damage it has. I believe we have 25 fire resistance. This will get through your fire resistance. You probably won't get hit by the extra combust, so you have that going for you. This is one that you hope you don't get friendly fire on. No praising Rex with Smokeless Flame, hopefully. Next up, we have Conjuration, and we have quite a few Conjuration ones. We come in with Pride Alliance. It's the standard spell, nothing special about it. Other than on Machaca, I do not like the Lion spell. Next up, we have the Hin, the Silat, and the Bin. The Hin is a interesting one. It is a ethereal hyena. It is an animal, but it has 14 magic resistance and 13 morale, so he's a tough boy. Stealthy, ethereal, he has magic, so you have to lead him around with mages. I don't know. I'm kind of so on those guys. They cost. You need an air and a fire to summon them, and they cost 4 air gems. Yeah, I don't know. You do get 5 plus half level, but still, I'm not sold on these guys. We already have ethereal people. We already have unseen people. I think we have better things to spend on, like the Silet. The Silet is a summonable mage. 1 fire, 2 air, 1 glamour. Not the best thing ever, but gets you out, get some extra glamour. If you can get Twilight up, these would be glamour 2s. Air and fire gives you some different magical options. We'll re-peek at magic and look at those. They are magical powered, so they do get that buff. They're okay. And we have the bin. The bin is like a hyena man, I guess. I'm not certain. They are magic beings. They are shock resistant and poison resistant. They're ethereal. They're stealthy. They're unseen. Nothing crazy there. They have a claw attack and a bite attack, so they're pretty good on attack density. What's interesting about them is you need water 1, air 1 to be able to cast. It's only 4 water gems, and you do get 5 plus half level. We do not have good water access, though, so unless you build your god to be able to get that, it's unlikely that you're going to have a ton of these guys running around. But great use of water gems if you actually do get the ability to do it. These guys are very usable troops. They mix in just fine with everything else that you're already doing. Further down Conjuration, if you go up to 8, we have Contact Marid. 2 water, 4 fire. So no native access to this. You have to have your god do it. It costs 60 water gems, and it summons in. But having to go back and forth a lot in this one. Are Marid. These were like genies that the other genies had exiled. They rebelled against the genies. 4 fire, 4 air, so these guys can do storm very easily for you. 2 water, an earth, 2 glamour. Very, very powerful. They are amphibian, and they have fear. Again, if you get to these guys, I would have them maybe help break you underwater. They do have a really high fire shield. These are similar to that Black King unit. They cause the unrest and very high unrest, so keep an eye on that. But I think it's worth trying to get enough to be able to summon these guys on your god, because, I mean, look at those paths. 4 air means we can do big air spells that people might not be thinking we can do, and we have lots of things that have storm immunity and some air, so putting storm up and then being able to storm power, very, very strong. This also would give you 2 water. 2 water, you can barely do it, but you can cast rain if you need to. If for some reason maybe Abyssia is being a problem, or in the test game behind me, Hinnom is being a problem, rain can be very powerful. We're going to look at a battle that shows that off when we get a bit further in here. All right, that takes us through the summons. As mentioned, I do want to just kind of go back into spells. Alteration is really good for us. Not only do we have people who have fire, air, and a little bit of earth, so decent self-buffing, especially for those genies that don't have any protection, getting personal stone skin or personal iron skin greatly increases their survivability. Like, that really, really helps. Being able to have some Earth 1 stuff to do with your Junker mages, if nothing else, they can Armor of Achilles and try to break enemy armor. It's Area Effect 1, it's something they can do. They can try to do Earth Grip. Again, it's something they can do. I do like getting that. Conjuration, very important for Phoenix power, for Summon Storm power, and for Elementals early on. In Evocation, in addition to our special spells, it should be noted that Fire 1, Earth 1 can do Magma Bolts. It's a pretty decent spell. It has 5 effects, and it's not too fatiguing. Way better than doing Fireflies, at least. If you hit people, it does Combustion, 25 plus damage that is blunt and magical. It's a decent spell. It gives them something to do. They will probably never be able to get up to Magma Eruption, because if you have Earth, the highest we get is Earth 1. So you'd have to like earth boots or something. It would be difficult. From fire, we should also note sulfur haze. At Evo 2, for 2 fire and an air, so again, very doable for us, you get a air effect 4 plus, and it does a heat stun. It does extra fatigue damage. So that can be pretty interesting. We have a lot of ways of doing like fatigue plays, and this is another way to help stack that. In addition, Fire Cloud, huge air effect of 8 plus, and just leaves that cloud there. Burning people, doing fatigue damage from the heat can be pretty nice there. Firestorm at 5 fire, which we can natively get guys who have 5 fire. For 3 fire gems, we can do continuously 6 armor piercing fire damage on the whole battlefield. That's pretty darn good. And we have troops who have fire resistance high enough to just ignore this. Once you have this spell, we have battlefield wipes. You could be, every couple turns, you could have a guy who could cast this, give him a couple genies to bodyguard him, and he just goes to the battlefield, he casts that, and then he exists for a couple rounds while everything dies. Very, very powerful there. Also of note, if you do go super duper high in here, Pillars of Fire is a pretty strong spell. It only requires Fire 2, so even our Fire 1 guys with a Bottle of Fire, they use the gem to cast Phoenix Power. Now they're a Fire 2 guy, and they can cast 5 of these before, 5 or 6 of these before they pass out. It's an Area Effect 1 spell, it's armor piercing and does 35 plus damage. Leaves a Lingering Cloud. Very, very powerful spell, but hard to get to. It's rare I get to Evo 8 in my games. Also from Evocation, it should be noted, we do have pretty good air access on one of our guys. If you're summoning him in, you could easily do Wrathful Skies. Big armor negating shock damage coming down. This is a lot rarer because we'd have to summon him in, and there's multiple steps to get here, but good. Very good. And plenty more there. Fire arrows, the arrow buffs, tons of things you can do to really juice up your army with magic. And we are a very magical nation. Okay, so let's bring that together. So we are a nation that has to take a dormant god, and when our dormant god wakes up, not only do we increase our gems, we get our god out, we get our sacreds and our huge commanders. Look at what I can recruit here in my capital. All these different genies, seducers, corruptors, casters, leaders, giant leaders, all those things. Look what I can do in this fort. A lot less exciting. A lot less exciting. So, your capital is vital. You cannot lose. Well, you've probably lost the game if you've already lost your capital, but you cannot have it under siege. You cannot have it like I did in this game. There's a river completely cutting off half my cap circle. If I had these two, I would have been cooking so much harder this game because I just didn't have enough resources to pump out the number of Gen Warriors in the early game that I wanted to. These guys are brutal against indies, but they cost 21 resources. If I kill my recruitment here, I'm up to 515 resources at this point in the game, and I still can only get that many. And in the early game, it was more like this. So, cap circle is very important. Our cap is very, very important. We are less reliant on getting a wasteland than some nations who do have wasteland summons because we can just do it at our cap. So that is at least something rather nice there. We have the recruit anywheres. So here's that Ubaran Sheik and the Ubaran Camel Riders. Very handy to have. Ditto with the Ubaran Desert Warriors, which could kind of be a nice little surprise for people. Can be pretty good on that. We have standard forts for the era, so there's no problems there at least. And our capital gets 2 commander points here, and then I don't know what gives us the upgrade. It must be City of Brass? Well, I can click this, I promise. I'm not sure which of these give us the extra commander point, but if you look in my capital here, I have 3 commander points. So I got this after my god woke up, but that means like I could do 3 seducers. Or I have no idea why, but I could do 3 scouts in my capital if I wanted. Or I could do 1.5 Shaitans. So something to note that when your god wakes up, your cap does get supercharged a little bit there. If you are not being countered with unseen stuff, with salt stuff, with specific iron items, you are an absolute wrecking crew against indies. Like, I didn't even have good expansion here. I had a bounce at one point, just a bad luck roll on a morale thing, I think. I took a throne. I used to own all this, but I had a Hinnom Yomi double team against me that I just abandoned this area so that I could hold my river point here. And I am now counterattacking. Very good at expansion. In multiplayer, you're going to get rushed, so you probably need to have a god that can help defend against that. I went kind of greedy on my god here. I'll show you that later. But I did want to show this off. This is kind of related to a stream that we did recently where we played Hinnom and absolutely dominated as Hinnom. And we noted that a lot of our units had Fear the Flood. So that's these boys right here. Our Raphite Warriors. These are the ones that we decimated with. So note here, he's got morale 18, and I believe that's going to go up to 19 when he gets blessed. So 19 morale is huge. Like, you'd think, oh man, there's no way you're ever going to break a 19 morale. Well, they have Fear the Flood. And Fear the Flood severely reduced morale during rain and underwater. So let's see what happens in this battle. I've got my goddess here. She's gonna bootleg us from a water 2. She's gonna bootleg us into a rain spell. And watch what happens when that rain starts. Go ahead and speed that up. 13 morale. I guess this guy didn't get blessed, so he lost 5 morale for the rain starting. That's a ton. That's a ton of morale loss. And a couple spells, and look, there they go. But I have genies flanking them, so they can't leave, and we kill all the sacreds. Now, the AI didn't have their sacred set up very well, but it just goes to show that having the proper counters to things is devastating. Just like salt would be to us, water is to them. So, can be pretty handy there. Otherwise, I do think this is a nation that would like some scales. Because we are so cap dependent, we need our cap to be able to pump all this stuff out. Like, I don't have my full cap circle. Look what I'm pulling in here. And we went relatively heavy here. I went 1 order 2 production in this game. And that has been alright. It would have been way better if I'd been able to get my cap circle. Let's actually segue that into actually looking at different gods that you might be interested in bringing. Ubar gets a pretty wide selection of gods. We have some of the like Greco-Titans, we have the African ones, we have the Middle Eastern ones, we have the like Mesopotamian ones, we have a lot of different immobiles, a lot of different monsters, and a very plain selection of Dominion ones. For special ones, we do have Son of the Fallen, which is a Hinnom god. We also have the Firstborn of Smokeless Flame. 220 points, reduced 40 for this nation. I don't know. I'm not a huge Titan fan, and yeah, that's hard to justify there. We are probably looking for something that, remember, we have to be dormant, so we cannot take an Awake Expander. I think that pretty much precludes these guys. Now, maybe they come out and they help counter a rush, like keep your capital safe. If that's your plan, maybe one of these guys. Maybe. I don't think so, though. I do think this is an area that maybe you need a Titan. Do note that we get extra heat scale and we get extra magic scale. I had been looking at using the Netter of the Moon or maybe the Netter of Many Names, but the scale change doesn't stack. So we can't go to Magic 4 with that. If I was going to pick for scales, I would probably pick for production. The Netter of Crafts is interesting. He gets a Forge bonus +2. So make him a hammer, he'd have a Forge bonus +3. Could make you some good stuff. But I don't know. I think if you're going to go with a Dom 3 guy, you need a fighter type. Maybe Great Mother. You could take... Maybe just Regen would be enough for your Sacreds to be pretty ballin'. So that plus maybe Hard Skin just for her. I don't know. That gets into the realm of being super pricey. Like, if we look at that... That's not even enough. Yeah, 6 points. So, Hard Skin and Regen. And we still are minus 2 points, so we'd have to go. I'd probably go like that. So this is she's still at -6. We haven't even upped this. I'd say 6 is our bare minimum. Maybe we lower our heat by 1. Geez, I don't know. We really want magic scales. Still can't afford it. Yeah, this is not good. Like, this is not good. This would be pretty powerful, but this, we're not going to be able to recruit nothing out of that. Other things, the immobiles, we did a golden idol recently. I think he was pretty interesting. Maybe a Dom 4 mobile, wooden Colossus or the bronze Colossus. I don't think we want to go with heat vulnerability because we have battlefield things that do heat. Maybe a bronze Colossus, but I mean, again, he is just so stupid expensive. So stupid expensive. I don't know. I really struggle justifying things like that. We don't have too many sacreds, so we don't need to worry about too much of a blessing. I think kind of whatever you take is fine. They would really like regen, but that's a hard pill to swallow with like how you're going to get that. We don't have the monolith. We don't have like an Ermine Sol or anything. I think you'd be looking at something like down here, like these, but again, they're so pricey. Yeah, I think these are somewhat to taste. Let's look at my taste here. This is Legally Distinct Jasmine, the Great Enchantress, and I took a very minimal bless here. We have Inspiring Presence, which just makes those tuba very efficient leaders. The extra inspirational plus 50 leadership really helps those slave troops out, and he can just move like 160 guys around, no problem. The extra inspirational is also nice for your Jin, who, while not cowards, you definitely don't want expensive troops routing off the field if you can help it. I took cold resistance just to negate the cold penalty we have on our sacreds, just to not have a hole in their defenses that deep. 1 level of reinvigoration and 1 level of heroism. We have really good mages. We have some thuggy stuff. We have some possible super combatant level stuff. Heroism's always appreciated there. Her pathing was specifically designed to be able to do summons. We can do our Merid summons with 2 water and 4 fire. I also can summon gnomes with Glamour 3, Earth 3. Gnomes break us into higher earth and into nature. So gnomes are very handy on this nation. Let us craft regen items, let us do more glamour things. She can do Twilight to buff my other glamour mages. She gives me some extra glamour gems, so to help that out there. Her pathing is high enough that she got some fire resist. Yeah, overall, a utility god mostly. Also, the Earth Glamour gives you the ability to craft glamour items for path boosting. So that can be really nice to get other guys out and they can do glamour stuff. The gnomes with enough boosters can also start doing like fairy queens, which helps you get into other pathing for Magic 2. Pretty nice there. She came out in my game. I did some site searching. My plan was to finish site searching my starting area essentially, and then run home. And I was going to rush up to up some conjuration, get some summons out, and I had already gone up some crafting to get some boosters out. But I had that early war with Hinnom, and I had to rush her over there. And it turned out really well. I won 2 key battles because of rain, essentially. And I essentially broke the Hinnom's back. I had almost all their sacreds killed, and I had sent in 2 raiding parties and a raid party of Jin, and my main army was marching towards their capital. So, turned out very well. I quite enjoyed that. Now, that's a very specific example, but it's just nice to have some paths that we don't have high enough to build boosters on otherwise. So I was pretty happy with this. I'm curious to see what other people have done. This is a nation I have very little experience on. I played them once in 5 and a couple small test games here before this. So I'm curious if there's like a Hellbless version of them or just a heavier Bless version. I quite like this build. Her scales was 6 Dom, so I could get 2 Sacreds per turn. And I have 1 order, 2 production. I went down to 2 heat to stop myself from having pop kill from high heat and to give myself some points. That's pretty nice. We're still going to be plenty hot. And then we ended up with 3 magic. Do note that that gives you -1 magic resist in your own lands, but it makes fatigue costs for spells lower, and it gives us +3 on the power. So if I'm in my own lands, that's a +5 to people who have heat power and magic power. That's a quite high bonus there. All right, so those are my thoughts on EA Ubar. A cool nation. I don't know why I didn't play them too much. I remember just not enjoying them. I really like Nabaa. They have a combination of Avite troops and some of this Jin desert stuff, which is a really, really powerful combination. But I quite enjoyed this one. Big super combatant mages, lots of guys who are immune to several different elemental things that we can throw around kind of haphazardly, whereas normally we get Praise Rex and half my army dies to friendly fire. We're going to have a lot less of that with this nation, I think. In addition, it's cool that they have a unique mechanic. I like that you have to be dormant. I like that you get some extra sites in your capital. It's just different. I really enjoy the variety of dominions, and this is higher on that scale of much, much different than a lot of other nations. All right, so leave any comments down below. I'm sure that there are some other strategies and nuance that I just haven't picked up yet. I'd love to hear what you guys know about the nation. Again, other god builds, like, it's a weak spot of mine that I just don't like Titans. I just really don't like Titans. I feel like they're about 2/3 overpriced. I think they should come in at like 180-ish at the high end, not 240 or 300 or something ridiculous. So if you have a Titan build, I'd be really interested to see what you've used and has worked. Otherwise, thank you very much, builders, and I will see you on the stream. Have a good one.